I'll be happy to answer any questions. I know I don't want to get into Kristen's time too much. I think I have 4 minutes, but since I was running so late, it might not be a big deal. And there may not be any questions, but do y'all have any questions?
Where do these trustees come from?
There's a panel. The trustees in South Carolina, there are one guy I used to work for. He's been a trustee since the Bankruptcy Act, where there wasn't a panel. And he just, one day the judge was like, will you be trustee in this case? And he's like, okay. And he's been...
These are lawyers, then.
Yeah. There used to be an accountant in Greenville who was a trustee. And he retired 10, 12 years ago. Everybody else after that's a lawyer. Because it's a fairly complicated area. And there are frequently one of the assets in Chapter 7 cases would be lawsuits that you can file. I mean, there's a case, forget the name of it, like Gold Dome or something. And you ever heard of Tyco Credit that used to be around here? Well, that was a big finance company, and their president did a whole lot of securities issues while he was raising lots of money. He ended up shooting himself when the company went down. And the trustee for that case hired some high-powered securities lawyers, and he generated so much money off that case suing to undo all this securities fraud this guy had done. His commission was $1 million. And the commission goes down the bigger the number. So he must have generated millions and millions and millions of dollars. Well, to recognize that, he happens to also, he's retired now, but he was also a law professor at the school when I was there, and he just retired 5-8 years ago. But there's a panel. You have to apply and be approved by DC and be on the list. And when somebody dies or quits or screws up, they add somebody to the list. And that doesn't happen very often. Our trustees here are really good. Charlotte has a panel too. There are more of them, but there are 1 million people in Charlotte. There are a lot more bankruptcies in Charlotte, but they have the panel system too. Same kind of thing. Most of them have been doing it. I think there's a guy who's not an accountant. There's an accountant up there who's a trustee. Any other questions?
What's your minimum fee for someone who has no assets, like a student that has credit cards?
Usually it's like $1,900 is the total for Chapter 7. 14 of that is attorney's fees. The rest of it's like filing fee for the court, the cost of credit counseling, debt management class. We pull all 3 credit bureaus going back 10 years. And you have to pay it all before we file, but you can pay $300 down, start telling creditors to call my office, and by law they're supposed to. Most of them will. And then, I've had people take 5 years to pay me. Then we file their case.
Where are the auctions held?
What auctions?
You said something about auctioning off.
If the trustee is auctioning off, are you talking about the foreclosure auctions or the bankruptcy auctions? If the trustee auctions off your assets, I've been to one where it was in the guy's front yard. They sold everything in his house. So it's the only time I've ever seen one of those. It was the Speaker of the House's brother about 20 years ago. But no, your personal property. I've had a trustee sell my client's personal property, like less than 5 times. I can't even remember one of those as an example, really. Usually what happens is the trustee says, okay, you've got your $5,000 Rolex that your father left you, okay? And we get it appraised to make sure it's not worth a whole lot, or it is worth a lot. And then our exemption in jewelry is $1,500, so we're talking $3,500. Well, we'll offer the trustee $1,500 or $2,000 not to take the watch. It's basically legalized blackmail, but it's how they generate money, My trustee friends wouldn't appreciate that. And you do the same thing with real estate. You can have your brother come in and pay the equity in the house to the trustee so they won't sell your house. But when there's an auction, when I've seen auctions, sometimes usually there's a sale. The trustee finds somebody to buy it. If he's got an auctioneer trying to sell a house, he'll just have an auction in the front yard of a house. if let's say you're selling my Mercedes-Benz, I don't have a Mercedes-Benz, but I'm in bankruptcy and you're selling my car, my boat, the trustee's selling it. He puts a notice of sale out to all the creditors, the debtor, and says, here's the price, here are the terms. If you have an objection, your objection has to be filed by this date, and there will be a hearing on this date in front of the judge if you file an objection. And you can be sanctioned and get in a lot of trouble for filing an objection to a sale and wasting all that money and time of everybody just to shoot a line of bull. And so generally you show up for the hearing date in the courtroom, and the judge will they'll have an auction in the courtroom. And whoever, I've seen people bid back and forth, and at the end somebody owns whatever it is they're selling. It's kind of cool. Anything else? Any other questions?
Credit counseling, how do those businesses, how did they get started? Are they growing more and more now?
Which type? The type I like or the type I don't like?
Well, what is the type you like? Which is the type?
The type I like is the one that don't really do much credit counseling. They get me the form I need to file the bankruptcy. The one I've always used is this really smart lawyer in Raleigh. She clerked for a judge, and then bankruptcy judge. Then she ended up working for a really good debtors lawyer in Raleigh. And then the law changed, and we all thought we were all going to be starving bankruptcy lawyers and dealing with bureaucratic chaos, which we were for a while. And she decided, I got a better gig, and she started her own credit counseling company, hired all these good-looking women, and went to seminars all over the country and, introduced cards to every bankruptcy lawyer in the country just about, and has this great computer system where you can do the credit counseling online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that company has exploded, and it's cheap, but there are other companies that do the same thing, and they all have to be approved by the U.S. trustee or the bankruptcy administrator. I mean, they're good companies. I've been poo-pooing it like it's a joke, but it's not. I don't think it accomplishes the result that basically the last bankruptcy bill was written and paid for by creditors, credit card companies who don't want to pay lawyers to go into court to argue about little piddly bankruptcy issues. So they instead paid lobbyists, gave Congress $455 million over 8 years. Bush's biggest contributor was MBNA to his first election, and he said, I will sign a bankruptcy bill. And you go in on record. So it took 8 years. We got one. It was written by the creditors. I went to Jim DeMint's office and asked him, his staff person, when we were lobbying in D.C. after the law was passed, what'd y'all do with this bill? And he said, well, we didn't read it. The leadership just brought it in here. It was really thick, and they said we had to vote for it, so they did. Every judge, nobody was in favor of that law. And I think that provision for credit counseling was put in there to delay people filing bankruptcy. So they'd go through one of these workout plans in that criminal industry that I don't like and delay people filing, because that's all creditors really want, and is people to not be in bankruptcy so they can deal with them with the creditors' laws. I'm a cynic, but I've been doing this too long. Any other questions?
Could a person who is maybe, say, $200,000 and has $500,000 in debt file a Chapter 7?
No.
What's the limit?
There's no limit. It's whatever the U.S. Trustee's Office determines as bad faith. And I haven't had too many families of 4 who make 80, 90 get through Chapter 7 successfully because of the means test, and because they look. You have to look at what your expenses are. Your expenses on your budget have to be for necessities only, and they have to be in amounts which are reasonable, and not what you think is reasonable. It's what the court says is reasonable. So yeah, usually those people would be in an 11 or a 13. Anything else? All right. I'm sorry I was late. Thank you for allowing me to speak.